Okay, we're good.
Okay, we're good. Okay, hi everybody, I'm Sara.
And I'm Jonathan.
And this is our recap of week 1 of Lindy 201, which we entitled A New Lindy Hop.
So the first thing we did is we cleaned up your swingouts by restraining space. And we talked about some principles of how we want to frame our version of a normal swingout. First thing we did is we talked about having a forward on 2 versus a forward on 1. Looks like this. 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay?
From a different angle.
From over here. 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Second thing we talked about was we cleaned up leads count 5. We want to make sure that we were opening up instead of crossing in front. Looks like this. 1, 2, 3, and 4. We want to make sure we are opening up like this versus crossing in front like this from the other angle. This is where we started from? No, over here. This is right. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Opening up.
And the reason being is that gives us way more options. The crossing in the front restricts certain options that you can do after that count 5.
Right. Third thing we cleaned up is we talked about this connection point here.
Yep.
We want to make sure this is a solid connection. We don't want a fingertip connection like this. One trick for this is you can slide your hand down the partner's arm and it'll click in place.
And we also had our arms relaxed, no excess tension, knowing that our arms would engage when necessary at certain points of the swing out, but when that engagement's not needed,
Relaxed.
relaxed.
Second, or fourth, I think,
Yeah.
is we talked about this connection here. Excuse me. How this connection here is we're a little bit lower than perhaps you were taught. If you notice my hands at like Sarah's rib cage level versus up on her shoulder blade. Again, if you notice, if you freeze on 4, let's start the other way. Our bodies are angled down this line. We're not squared off. We're a parallelogram.
Parallelogram, yep.
That's the right one, yeah.
We're still facing each other. We're not totally turned away or away, but there's just this little angle.
Okay. And then we talked about our lines, which we'll demonstrate from this angle.
So we talked about the follow being, so you can see my head, the follow being on a 12-6 axis and the lead being on a 1-7 or 8-2.
Watch it from this angle. 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay.
And then we talked about our Lindy circle. And
Right.
we talked about how it starts off linear, goes rotational, ends linear.
And again, this is how we're defining it. There's a lot of ways to do a Lindy circle.
A default.
This is our default. Looks like this. 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Rotation,
Rotational.
rotation, back. From this angle. 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Rotation, rotation, triple back.
Okay.
And then we talked about our principles.
Yeah. And the first one we talked about was our frame.
Right.
So we started off with weight. We asked you guys where you thought your weight should be. We ended up with some defaults. 1, over the balls of your feet, so your heels can be clicked. We had the exercise jumping up and landing, and loosening your joints up, clicking your heels, making sure that this
Not too
didn't
far back.
happen, or this didn't happen, but this.
And we're not clenching our toes. We had a question about that.
Yes, and we also had the observation that you want your weight on one foot primarily at all times, not split weight.
And then we talked about posture next, where we imagined we had a string attached to our breastbone and we were lifting it up, rolling our shoulders back and engaging our back muscles, engaging our core, but also having our joints completely loose.
And breathing.
And breathing. Don't die.
Arms are loose. And then lastly, we talked about our eyes are up, our heads are up. We're not doing this even if we're worried about what our feet are doing.
Yes. And then we talked about movement.
Yes. And specifically, we started off with keeping your feet underneath you at all times. That for both leads and follows, our movement is initiated from our core. Our feet are underneath that core. We don't want them stepping out from underneath that as we dance.
And then we talked about pulsing. We want to make sure that our pulse matches the pulse of the music. Also want to make sure that our pulse is down on the ground versus up. We don't want to pulse like this, we want to pulse like this. And then we talk about momentum, and that the general rule of thumb that a follow motion stays in motion until acted on by an outside leader. Whereas generally speaking, it's the leader's job to determine a vector, and it's the follow's job to maintain that vector with the same speed, with the same direction, and so forth. We'll talk a lot about momentum coming up.
Yes.
And then, what's next?
And then we went into, this is a good test for us.
Why?
Hang on while we get the cheat sheet out and make sure we're not leaving anything out.
Connection points.
Connection points.
Connection
That's
zones.
what I thought. Okay, so connection zones. So we define 3 basic connection zones. 1, this one. 2, this one. And then 3, a metaphysical connection zone, which is our attention. So our eyes, our awareness, our focus, our just attitude towards our partner. And we also talked about ways to make that connection without it being awkward or uncomfortable. So simple things like talking to your partner, smiling at your partner, where you can look, keeping kind of a nice focus, traveling around up here, you know, looking at their shoulder, looking at their collar button.
Tricks like that.
Yeah, and saying things like, oh, I liked what you did there, and thank you.
And then we finally talked about how awareness of your partner is kind of a spectrum. The first thing you want to know is where they are. Second thing you want to know is where their weight is. Third thing you want to know is what they're doing. Fourth thing you want to know is how they're doing it. And then lastly, you want to know why they're doing it. And I think that's as far as we got for this first lesson. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, and we'll see you next week.
All right.